treasured in folklore as the glorious ruler of a fairy tale kingdom, King Arthur is perhaps Britain's most famous regent. In fabled Camelot, King Arthur is said to have summoned a great fellowship of heroes to sit at a magical round table. Today, King Arthur enjoys more popularity than ever. Not since the Middle Ages has his legend been more acclaimed or emulated. It seems we still yearn for the lost glory of knightly deeds and the charms of courtly love that existed in King Arthur's golden era. But the source of King Arthur's enduring power lies in a realm far deeper than that portrayed in medieval romance. The mythology of King Arthur is immeasurably old and emanates from the ancient customs of a prehistoric dream time.
So who was King Arthur? Was he an historical king of the Britons? Did he ever exist? Or was he, as some believe, an ancient solar deity who has lived many times? Those who believe in King Arthur romances claim that there still exist today many places that are still haunted by King Arthur. So come join us now as we go and search for the once and future king.
Located in southeast Wales is the mysterious Arthur's Cave. Welsh folklore maintains that deep within this cave, King Arthur is slumbering peacefully in a concealed chamber. The origin of this Welsh legend is perhaps many thousands of years old, for the cave was once occupied by Neolithic people who venerated the great cave bear. Early man would have witnessed the bear's death-like hibernation during the winter and its remarkable awakening months later in the spring. It may have been from these primitive observations of the natural world that resurrecting heroes such as King Arthur gradually evolved. Throughout the ages, caves have come to be regarded as the shadowy domain of not only bears, but also fiery dragons. The ancients were awed by these fabulous beasts. Images of the bear and the dragon were even recognized in the stars, which form the constellations at the center of the northern sky. The age-old combination of these two creatures is all the more fascinating when we realize that together, the bear and the dragon form King Arthur's original Welsh title, Arth Pendragon.
Other similar sounding Gaelic words, such as Arthach, Arthurach and Arthur, if you'll excuse my Gaelic pronunciation, mean respectively giant, ethereal and ancestor. While giant ethereal ancestor accurately describes King Arthur, his abbreviated name, Art, is an old Irish word meaning simply a rock.
The ancient association of King Arthur's name with rocks, supernatural beings and ancestral giants may explain why so many of Britain's oldest landmarks have been named in his honor. Persisting from time immemorial is the belief that primeval giants had shaped various landforms and had erected huge megalithic monuments throughout the British Isles. Ancient mythology suggests that these legendary giants were the offspring of celestial beings who had descended from the starry realms. The massive standing stones, circles and tombs which these giants are said to have built are not only numerous, but extremely widespread. It is now generally accepted by scholars that the original purpose of these monuments probably involved some sort of astrological function. But a grand circular temple, which measured the movements of the sun and stars, had long been known in folklore as the Giant's Dance. The most famous of these circles is Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain. An Arthurian legend tells of how Merlin discovered the secret of the Giant's Dance in Ireland. Using his supernatural powers, he is said to have spirited this magical ring of stones across to England, where it became the focus of ancient regeneration rituals. Less than 20 miles to the north of Stonehenge lies a larger and far older megalithic site. The enormous Avebury Sun Temple, Silbury Hill, and West Kennet Barrow are all located within walking distance of each other. 5,000 years ago, the Giant's Dance at Avebury was indeed an elaborate affair. Little of its former glory remains today. Most of the massive standing stones were smashed in the 17th and 18th centuries to construct the village of Avebury, and many of its buildings actually lie within the original outer circle. There were once 4 entrances to the inner temple, and from the southern one, a great avenue of stones led to a tomb known as West Kennet Barrow. Huge sarsen stones obscure its entrance. Of the thousands of burial mounds in Britain, this is the longest, and dating to 3,500 years before Christ, it is also the oldest. There are stories that when barrows like this were opened, the excavators were astonished to find the skeletons of giant men 8 feet tall or more. The tomb of West Kennet Barrow overlooks yet another grand enigma, that of Silbury Hill. Covering over 5 acres, Silbury Hill is the largest artificial mound in Europe. According to local tradition, it is the resting place of an ancient Sun King. Although excavations have shown that the hill is filled with huge layers of chalk blocks and rubble, the legend persists that deep within the center of this mound, an undead king sits astride a great war horse. Clad in golden armor, he, like King Arthur, awaits his call to battle. The image of a solar king on horseback was central to the religions of Europe's earliest metal civilizations. The eastward spread of the Indo-Europeans saw the equestrian sun god revered across a landscape which stretched from Scandinavia to India. Often the sun was represented as a golden disc which was mounted upon a fiery chariot. It was escorted in its arc across the sky and into the underworld of night by a solar hero. A closer inspection of this 3,000-year-old statue from Denmark reveals that such a sun king once sat upon the horse. The image of King Arthur as a mounted solar warrior is integral to the legend of his expected return. The equestrian concept of Arthur is linked with 2 of Scotland's oldest hilltop fortresses. Utilized in the Bronze Age, these strongholds were built high upon hilltops that held a commanding view of the vales below. According to Scottish tradition, the fortresses were built near subterranean caverns wherein King Arthur is said to lie sleeping. It's a time-honored belief that when King Arthur awakens, he will descend from this high peak, mounted upon a magical steed called Dun Stallion.
Scholars now agree that over the centuries, Two separate Arthurs have been unintentionally commingled to form the King Arthur character that we are familiar with today. One of these Arthurs was a mythical king who was venerated from the earliest of prehistoric times. The other, an historical war leader, lived in the 5th century AD.
Ten years after the death of Christ, Britain was absorbed into the mighty Roman Empire. Although conquered, the tribal Brits were now able to witness the marvels of Roman engineering, as well as the undreamed-of luxuries that civilization provides. For almost 400 years, Britain experienced the benefits of a strong centralized government and the protection of Rome's efficient armies. However, with the death of Constantine III, Britain's last Roman ruler, and the sudden withdrawal of all troops to defend Rome itself, the British Isles were once again plunged into an age of darkness. It was a time of massive upheaval for the abandoned Romano Brits, as wave after wave of marauding Picts, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons descended upon their shores. The disorganized Brits were powerless to halt this savage onslaught, and for 15 years, the mayhem continued. In 425, the Welsh leader Vortigern managed to assume an absolute power over the quarrelsome British tribes. In an effort to stop incursions into northern Wales, Vortigern decided to build a fortress high in the mountains of Snowdonia. The site he chose was close to an abandoned Roman copper mine. But despite all efforts, the great tower of the fortress kept falling down. In desperation, Vortigern called in his Druid priests. The Druids suggested that the foundations of the tower should be sealed with the blood of a fatherless child. The intended victim was an unusual boy who was to grow into manhood as the famous wizard Merlin. Merlin's early prophetic powers revealed that the tower kept collapsing because in a cavern far below it, two ancient dragons were constantly at war. According to Merlin, the white dragon represented the invading Saxons, and the red symbolized the Welsh people. He predicted that the red dragon would eventually overcome the white, and to this day, the red dragon flies proudly as the national flag of Wales. When Vortigern was killed, the mantle of the Welsh dragon fell upon a powerful war leader called 𝘬𝑡𝑗. Recalled from his exile in the French province of Brittany, 𝘬𝑡𝑗 became the High King of Britain. The focus of the Pendragon saga now shifts to the rugged coast of Cornwall. Throughout its long history, the Kingdom of Cornwall had maintained a proud cultural independence from the rest of England. This was partly due to its formidable cliffs, which provided a natural protection from seaborne invasions. From the vantage point of these high cliffs, the people of Cornwall were able to keep a constant surveillance of their rugged coastline. Although their coastal citadels were vulnerable to Atlantic squalls and pounding seas, it was these very elements, together with the wild beauty of the landscape, that inspired the otherworldly magic of Cornish folklore. It's easy to understand how here in Cornwall, history became infused with romance. For it was amidst this enchanted setting that legend places the curious circumstances of King Arthur's birth. To celebrate the coronation of 𝘂𝐻 as High King, a lavish feast was held in Londinium. From even the remote areas, such as Cornwall, the great lords and chieftains came to swear their allegiance to the new king. It was during these festivities that 𝘂𝐻 Pendragon fell in love with a beautiful woman named Igraine. Unfortunately, Igraine was already married, and to a loyal supporter, Gulwaz, the Duke of Cornwall. Undaunted by this fact, 𝘂𝐻 Pendragon promptly ordered the Duke off to a distant war. Fully aware of the king's desire for his wife, the Duke had made arrangements for Igraine's immediate return to his castle at Tintagel. Almost an island, the Tintagel headland is itself a natural fortress. Today, it's connected to the mainland by this modern bridge. The original causeway that existed at the time of Arthur has long since crumbled into the sea. Given the rugged isolation, Gulwaz must have believed that Igraine and their 3 daughters would be safe here. Yet 𝘂𝐻 remained utterly infatuated, and so he sought from Merlin a magical intervention. The wizard consented to help, but on the condition that 𝘂𝐻 must surrender to him the child that would be born of this illicit union. Having agreed, 𝘂𝐻 swallowed a magical potion and was transfigured into a perfect semblance of the lady's husband. In this disguise, 𝘂𝐻 Pendragon hastened to Cornwall. There he crossed the causeway and climbed the long stairway to the castle's gatehouse. Unchallenged by the guards, 𝘂𝐻 made his way to Igraine's private quarters. That night, the Duke of Cornwall mysteriously died in battle, and King Arthur was conceived. The following spring, a strange apparition appeared upon the sea. It seemed a ship, the shape thereof a dragon winged, and all from stern to stern bright with shining people on the decks, and gone as soon was seen. And down the waves in flame was borne a naked babe, and rode to Merlin's feet, who stooped and caught the babe and cried, "The King." 𝘂𝐻's secret contract with Merlin had been fulfilled. Tennyson's account of King Arthur's birth was inspired by Merlin's cave. It's located in a cove far below the towering cliffs of the Tintagel headland. Stretching clear through the headland's base, the cave is accessible only at low tide, and it's here that a young Arthur is said to have been schooled by Merlin. But these lessons, held deep within a cave, couldn't have been ordinary. For caves were timeless, otherworldly spaces, and as such, Merlin's cave may once have been an ancient place of initiation. It's also possible that a boy like Arthur may have received a Christian education from the monks who built a small monastery here during the 5th century. Although these legends of Arthur's birth and upbringing are usually considered to be pure fantasy, claims of his actual presence at Tintagel were given an unexpected boost in 1998. Archaeologists excavating the headland's many ruins unearthed a stone slab, which appropriately dated to the 5th century, and inscribed upon it was the name Arthur. Such is the power of Arthur's myth, that this find not only made headlines locally, but was reported all around the world. From antiquity, stones have been regarded as symbols of permanence and otherworldly powers. they were thought to be receptacles of energy which could be transmitted to certain individuals who came into contact with them. Because of this, special stones became an essential feature of coronation ceremonies. Even today, the practice continues. The present British Queen, Elizabeth II, was crowned upon the illustrious Stone of Destiny, which lay beneath the seat of the coronation throne in Westminster Abbey. This stone had previously been used by the Scottish and Irish kings, and before them, the biblical kings of Judea. A similar Stone of Destiny is central to the story of King Arthur's enthronement. It concerns a mighty sword embedded deeply within an enchanted megalith. Arthur proved himself to be the true-born king when he was able to free this sword from its ancient encasement. Hidden within this colourful imagery are the vestiges of an extremely old tradition. Across the Irish Sea, another great stone stands upon the hill of Tara. Since Neolithic times, the hill of Tara was regarded as the most sacred site in Ireland, and it was here that her Celtic high kings were crowned. The ancient monolith was said to have come from the mythical city of Phallius, and so was endowed with magical powers. The stone would resonate when touched by the rightful king, who would then perform a symbolic mating with the goddess of the land. It was believed that this age-old ritual would ensure that the earth remained fertile. The countrysides of northwestern Europe once abounded in great standing stones and fertility rings. But with the advent of Christianity, they came to be reviled as pagan symbols, and most of them were destroyed. A few of the huge fertility monuments survived, especially in France. They'd been engraved with Christian symbols or surmounted with the Christian cross. The ancient Celts also believed that magical powers flowed through springs and lakes, but these had a feminine aspect and were mostly concerned with healing. It was from the Lady of the Lake that Arthur received yet another sword, the legendary Excalibur. Woven into its scabbard were charms that could heal the wounds of battle. Armed with his magical regalia, Arthur Pendragon was inaugurated as the High King of Britain. His might was proclaimed and his destiny sealed. Having received the mantle of rulership, King Arthur is said to have undertaken a series of adventures, each brimming with supernatural marvels. One of his most famous exploits begins aboard a magical ship called Prydwen, upon which he ventures into the Celtic underworld. The otherworld was a dark and untamed realm, guarded by monstrous serpents and hostile demons. King Arthur's quest was to bring back the miraculous Cauldron of Immortality. Despite the terrifying forces arrayed against him and the loss of all but 7 of his crew, King Arthur was eventually able to win the mystical vessel. This cauldron reputedly had the power to resurrect the dead. Arthur continued to explore the depths of his ancient Celtic heritage, and strange were the contests he faced in that unearthly place. But as King Arthur was being taught the age-old traditions of solar kingship, a new way to life everlasting was taking hold in Britain. In Arthur's time, hermit monks were spreading the message that the true Son of Light had arrived, and that this Christ was the King of all kings. As sovereign of his land, it would have been Arthur's duty to consider these claims, and so he also made journeys to newly Christianized sites. Located in Cornwall, the remains of St. Madden's Cell are now surrounded by the overgrown ruins of a later medieval enclosure. At one end of the hermit's tiny retreat, is an ancient granite slab which served as his altar. At the other end is a baptismal font, into which water from an old sacred spring still bubbles. The old texts record that Arthur once visited such a monk, and apparently he abode in this very area. It was during his stay with a hermit that King Arthur is said to have been inspired to have the image of the Madonna and Child emblazoned upon his shield. Medieval writers believed it was this conversion that empowered King Arthur to win his 12 decisive victories against the Saxon invaders.